Welcome to Rock and Roll Fridays, a podcast on musical encounters and
Welcome
life.
to Rock and Roll Fridays, and I'm so happy to have a guest this week. Gary Waldman is joining me. Welcome, Gary.
Thanks for having me on.
So Gary is, I can say, a music man, right? Your whole life has been dedicated and surrounded by artists, musicians, creative types. And tell us a little bit about you for the audience, and then we can talk about one of, I think, your closest pupils and musicians, Neal Casal. But let's talk about Gary first.
All right. Well, yeah. The whole I had to give up the idea of getting a day job. I finally got too far in where it was like there's no going back now. I just grew up, as a lot of kids do, loving music and just dreaming about songs and bands, and eventually took up guitar when I was a teenager. And at that point I gave up playing baseball, which I was pretty good at until I was, and it was all about music from that point on. And from the point that I was a young kid, I just was really impacted. My sister was 8 or 9 years older than me, so when I was 5, 6 years old, it was at the height of the Beatles and the Stones and James Taylor and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and I would hear those records coming through the floor from her downstairs bedroom, and
That's awesome.
Just became the music that I loved. And eventually, when I was going to college, I got a job at a record store called Al Wilk Records in Morris County, New Jersey. And I got an internship at MTV, actually through a customer that used to come and buy records from us. And he became a friend of mine and offered me an internship. So I worked at MTV for about a year as an intern, logging in videotapes, long interviews with Madonna, clip out the best parts. I did things like that. And then eventually got a job at a label called Megaforce Records, which was the label that found Metallica and Anthrax and a bunch of other great metal bands. Metal really wasn't my number one music, but I did love lots of metal bands, and getting offered a job to work at a label when you're 23, you just take it, and there was no looking back from there.
Yeah.
About the same time I started working there is when I met Neal Casal in 1987, and we became great buddies and just started working on things together. At that point, I figured I was not going to be the guy with the guitar out in front on the stage, but I was going to be either a record label manager, tour manager, something like that, to be around the music that I love. And eventually started managing Neal, and that led to 32 years working together.
That's amazing. And for people that don't know Neal's music, what's kind of the, I have my own thoughts. I'm obviously a big Neal Casal fan, but what are your thoughts around, for people that don't know his music? How do you describe it? How do you describe the songwriting, the types of songs that Neal created?
I would say he's in your classic 70s singer-songwriter mode. That's at least what we had imagined when he started writing songs. Initially, we thought maybe he would form a band that was in the mold of a Rolling Stones, Faces kind of thing.
Right.
That he truly loved. And then the Black Crowes came out in 1990, so we're like, well, they beat you to that. and he had really he grew up liking the same type of music as me. We loved Neil Young and Bob Dylan and James Taylor and John Denver, the classic singer-songwriters, but we also loved hard rocking stuff as well, and more rock bands, and eventually started writing songs, and it just fell into that. To us, it was an update of that 70s California sound. So hear influences from Jackson Browne, or maybe Young in there, certainly not in his singing, but in just some of the themes and the way he played guitar as well. And that was what we imagined. We imagined that he would have a solo career where for years he could either play with a band or play solo, because he was equally good in both of those. doing either one of those with a band or playing solo guitar and piano. He was amazing at that. He was a phenomenal singer and songwriter, and just somehow fell under the radar, as a lot of great artists do. He never had a big success. He was fairly well known in the roots alt country world, right, which the way it was described as that time, now it would be called Americana. And he did have a decent career where he toured all over Europe and Japan and in the US, and eventually he joined Ryan Adams in the Cardinals.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, for someone that, you know, to the mainstream music business, or, you know, I always think this is the beauty of music, right? Who's the guitarist and playing in that band, and you find out more about that person and their background. I mean, he played with Willie Nelson, the Jayhawks, Lucinda Williams, Chris Robinson, obviously, Shooter Jennings, Phil Lesh. So he, you know, from a musical standpoint, was obviously highly regarded as a studio musician and a live performer, if these people were willing to bring him on to the acts and to the shows.
Yeah. Well, the thing that made Neal ideal in that role was that he was such a good songwriter himself. So where a lot of times you'll see a band and there's a great guitar player, and of course they're musically talented, but they may not be a songwriter or singer pursuing their own songs like Neal had done.
Right.
So Neal had that experience and understood how to be supportive in a role. So pretty early on, he was playing as and he loved that. Actually, he wasn't eager to be, I got to be front and center. That was not personality at all. He liked being part of a unit, and for him to be over there to the right of a great frontman like Chris Robinson or Ryan Adams, for Neal to be there playing great guitar and singing great harmonies and lifting it up to another level, he loved that. And I think that's why people, like you just mentioned, gravitated towards him, because he had the sensitivity to understand what a front person or songwriter was going through, and he knew how to support them.
Yeah, and I think the songs are so, like, when you listen to Neal Casal, my takeaway, my personal takeaway, but I'll also tell you a story. The songs are so subtle, but so complex and pretty. Like, I always thought Neal Casal's tone on his guitar was, it sounded like California. It sounded sweet. It sounded strong and emotional all at the same time. And my girlfriend often, when I'm playing music, will walk by and say, I really like that song. And it's a Neal Casal song, you know, and it's not this overriding, you know, hard-hitting song, but just the melodies, the lyrics, and the tone of the guitar, I always thought was just perfect.
Yeah. I'm glad that she picked up on that, because that was always the starting point with him, was the sound of the guitar or the riff he was playing or the melody, whether it was acoustic guitar or electric guitar. He had his own style, and subtle, I think, is a great word to describe it, because Neal was never flashy. He was never, it's all about me. But like most solo artists, he was also confident in his ability, also very sensitive. So he was able to sing in a very emotional way. And when I go back and listen to it, I just remember the heart and soul that he put into all of his performances. He really was a thoughtful songwriter. He really thought about how the words fell together, how he would phrase his singing.
Yeah.
And I think that's really stood the test of time. When I hear his older records, I hear that young, hopeful guy, especially in the first couple records. And I love that.
Well, I think, and I'll name a couple tunes and you can definitely talk a couple tunes, but for people that want to check out Neal, some of my favorites are obviously Everything Is Moving is a great song. Detroit or Buffalo, The Day in the Sun, Sweet in the Distance is one of my all-time favorites. It's such a great song. And even like Bird with No Name, it's just these
Yeah.
Subtle is the word, but you're listening to it and you're like, that's a great song, you know, like without any over the topness or any need to add more solo or more this or more that. They're such, you know, and maybe California is one of my favorites also. So I don't know, you know, is there a starter Neal Casal song or two that you would say, hey, go check out these tunes if you're new to Neal Casal music?
Yeah, well, you just mentioned one, maybe California, which I think is fairly definitive song from his first album. There's so many good songs. The Basement Dreams album to me really shows a fairly full range of what Neal could do. A lot of that he made at home and made himself. He'd learned how to record and was really good at it, and brought in some friends to sing pieces here and there. There's a song on there called Promises to Keep that I love. Fremont Row is a great song on there. So many of them. And I think one of the things that's interesting about Neal records is that, I don't want to be like back in my day, but back in my day, we get into records, right? So whereas now we just have so many records at our fingertips, and I, like anybody else, I love that. I love being able to hear tons of records. But back then, you only had what you could buy. You couldn't go and listen to everything. So
Yeah.
there's an experience about listening to Neal records where they really grow on you. And it may take 4 or 5 listens to a full album to really have the impact that I think is there, because back to that word subtle, it wasn't in your face. As you listen to Neal's songs more, the melodies start to creep in, the words start to make more of an impact on you. And that's what we loved back then about our favorite records, that we knew them from beginning to end. They were part of our lives. And
Right.
Those were the records he wanted to make. He did want to make records that stood the test of time, that could have meaning in somebody's life and would give more and more to you each time you hear them. When I hear Neil Young After the Gold Rush, and I've been listening to it for 50 years or whatever, I still hear things that seem new to me or make an impact on me. That's the magic power that music has. And I love, of course, hearing everything. And I love having that ability, but there's something to be said for that. You had a shelf full of 34 records, and those were your records. That was you dug into.
That was your playlist of your life. Yeah. I often talk about it. You know, obviously your relationship with Neal and artists are, you know, much different. The premise of my show, right, is the common man meeting their bands and their artists. And I got to meet Neal twice, once in Philly at the Ardmore Music Hall, great little venue, and at the Fillmore in San Francisco. And, you know, when you meet musicians and you meet your artists and you meet your people and they're cool and they're soulful and they're nice, it just makes you appreciate their music so much more. And I remember Chris Robinson talking about Neal and the fans. And I was at enough CRB shows to know, like, Neal would always be the last guy at the show saying hi to fans and taking pictures, and just, he was so engaging with the fans. And, you know, my little moments were a couple minutes here or there. One was a little longer, but it just makes you as a fan appreciate and love the music that much more when, you know, you get to meet the people and they're nice. And I use that word soulful with Neal, and I'm not the only one to use it, but can you talk a little bit about his connection with the fans and the people at those CRB shows? Because it was such a unique, intimate experience at those shows.
He loved that. He loved that about being on tour, about meeting people. And he knew what it meant to him when he had met when he was a young, up and coming roller, and got to meet some of people that he admired. I remember one time, and this is a strange comparison, maybe. We met Vivian Campbell. We went to a show. I think he was playing guitar with Dio. It was a metal.
Wow. Wow.
Campbell was a fantastic guitar player, and he played with Ozzy a little bit. Or no, that was Jakey Lee. Vivian played with Dio, and we met him in at something, I forget what, and he was so nice. And I remember Neal was like, "What a nice guy! That was so nice that he actually like seemed interested in us." I was like, "Yeah, it was nice." And then met some other people, along the way, and I think he knew. We used to talk about when you go to a concert, especially back in the old days, you would think about the concert all week. You couldn't wait to go. You couldn't wait to get there.
Yeah.
We're getting psyched to go. And he knew that feeling because we were fans just like, anybody. And it meant so much to him to walk out. And when people were like, Neal, and he was just a good dude. He wanted to say people, and he knew there was he didn't want to ever be that guy that like, oh, I met that guy, he was whatever. He didn't want to be that guy. He wanted to act on people, and he remembered that somebody took their time to schedule their day around coming to this show, and that meant a lot to him, and we didn't lose track of that. He certainly never lost track of that. It was always nice to people.
Well, Neal's legacy, and he's obviously still helping people, and through the Neal Casal Music Foundation, which everyone should check out, whether you know Neal Casal or not, the foundation, it's the Neal Casal Music Foundation. Can you talk a little bit about the foundation, how that came to be, and what its cause is, and how people can get involved?
Yeah. After Neal died, which was in August of 2019, we, of course, all of his friends were devastated, and we came up with a tribute concert that we had at the Capitol Theater in Port Chester, New York, in September of 2019.
Yep.
Bunch of artists playing Neal's songs, playing songs that meant something to Neal. 7 hours worth. You can find it on YouTube if you look it up.
I watched it. Yeah, it was amazing. It was one of the longest concerts I've watched, but one of the most powerful. I mean, that was a powerful night.
It really was. It was a magical night. And that experience led us to making a tribute album where 41 songs of Neal's songs were covered by friends of his, artists, some artists that he didn't know. And that's coming out in November. It's called Highway Butterfly.
Highway Butterfly, yep.
And out of that experience, we decided to form a foundation to help musicians, because it's not an easy lifestyle to go through. And Neal gave his life to music beginning to end. And we want to be able to help other musicians who are struggling either with healthcare, mental health issues, just surviving, because it's not a normal way of life a lot of the times. And yeah, we've all seen the big rock stars who have had big success, but there's just as many, and probably many more, just working musicians, whether they play in a band like Neal did many times, or any guy or girl who's in a band and wants to play music for their life. And to make it work financially is hard. So you have to work really hard. And then it's like, oh, what about health insurance? Oh, right. I don't have a company. How do I do this? And when do I go to the doctor? Oh, well, this tour is coming up. I'll go when I come back. And then you come back, and then, well, we're making a record. And it's a very hard lifestyle. And we want to be able to help people. We're fortunate enough that we've been able to raise some money to help musicians directly. And a lot of it is through Music Cares, which is the Grammy Foundation's organization that helps musicians, or Backline, which is an organization that formed after Neal died because they were affected by Neal's death as well, and some other deaths in the music world. And they wanted to be able to be there to help people. Like, okay, you pull into Cincinnati after a 12-hour drive, you're struggling, you need to talk to somebody. That's where they help. Whether you're a crew person or a musician, they're helping all kinds of people. It's a great organization. Right. And so we've been able to raise some money and donate to them. They have healthcare professionals on staff. So we've partnered with both of those organizations in some initiatives to donate money to musicians. And the other part of our foundation is to give instruments and lessons to young and up and coming musicians. music programs in schools aren't what they used to be. So you can hear the construction.
Yeah.
And so we want to be able to give to young musicians, here's a guitar, your own guitar. You don't have to borrow it from the
Right.
school.
Right.
Here's 3 lessons. We heard that you're the one here at this school. You're the up and coming guitar player.
That's amazing.
So we've been able to do that, and it's been great. I don't think Neal could ever have imagined like a foundation in my name. He'd probably be embarrassed, but I don't care. He was a great artist, and we want to honor his name and introduce young people to his music. And if we can raise money through our initiatives to help musicians and then help young musicians to have careers, that's
absolutely. And the cause and the mental health, whether it be famous people or it affects everyone. You're seeing it with athletes now coming out, more musicians, corporate America. So it can affect anyone, and especially the grind of being on tour and playing music and not having the resources available. It's a great cause, and I urge everyone to check out Neal Casal Music Foundation. I urge everyone to check out Neal Casal's music. And Gary Waldman, it's been a pleasure and an honor to chat with you. I appreciate your time. I know you have construction going on at your house, so I will let you go. And thanks so much for being on Rock and Roll Fridays.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. And I hope people check out this record when it comes out. It's called Highway Butterfly, the songs of Neal Casal. There's people like Steve Earle and Phil Lesh and Bob Weir and Warren Haynes and Jamie Wyatt and Shooter Jennings and Beachwood Clark, Aaron Lee Tesh.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Really fun. And when I see the names all together and there's titles of Neal's songs next to it, it's really special to us. And I hope people find the time to dig into it. It's 3 hours and 17 minutes long. Maybe next time Instagram or Facebook goes down, everybody will have
that's so true. Well, thanks so much, Gary.
All right. Thank you.